By the beginning of 1946, many people believed that the Second Weltkrieg was coming to an end. The Commune of France, seen by many as the strongest nation within the syndicalist Third International, had been brought to its knees. A few thousand soldiers were stranded amongst the dust in the area of former Spain with no way out. They would die there while others surrendered. The remaining target was the Union of Britain that stood together with Scotland and the Welsh Union. Battles at sea were fierce, as the syndicalist British threw all of their resources at the enemy. It would prove a very difficult task to penetrate the walls and bunkers at the shores of the British Isles. Many thought that even the British syndicalists realized that they could no longer win the war, but they were damn sure to not let any invaders come into their home. They swore to fight off the invaders' attempts again and again and again. Though for some, the victory over the Commune of France seemed the most important, to Canada and King Edward VIII, the real prize was to recapture their old homeland. He was happy that this battle would be the last. King Edward had hundreds of thousands of soldiers and tanks stationed in France at the ready for when a naval invasion by its allies had been pulled off successfully. Its ally, the Dominion of India, would probably not take part in those attempts, as it had to deal with a three-way civil war with its neighboring factions. America had notified the Indian government that help was on the way. Naval battles had come all the way to the waters between Britain and Ireland, yet the naval forces were not able to even make a dent in the British defenses. The first naval invasion attempt was done by the West Indies. It was hastily and without real consequences, as they did not attack any place that had a port for reinforcements. All military units participating in this attack lost their lives. By April of 46, almost all remaining British soldiers had been dealt with at areas that were now dominated by Portugal and Greece. By then, Britain had lost over 2 million men during the Weltkrieg, but nevertheless, their spirits were high and the people believed they could hold their island for many years to come. The ever-increasing aggressiveness of the nation of Japan helped fuel these thoughts, as Russia realized it had to put more focus and finances to that front to the east. Then halfway through September, the Kingdom of France attempted to invade Britain with a bigger army than the West Indies had. As all the areas with a port or dockyard were heavily defended, areas further away were chosen to attack. But the soldiers suffered heavy losses during the beach invasion, and enemy reinforcements from nearby towns were quick to respond. Canada also had 10,000 troops at the ready to support an invasion by one of their allies to hopefully divide the attention of the syndicalists. The second time that the Kingdom of France tried to invade, the attacks went better. They had help from the West Indies and altogether sent out almost 20,000 troops along the shoreline. The Canadians, together with the Dutch and American units, tried to then put pressure on the shores to the west, but were not able to get through dangerous waters completely shut down by coastal artillery. In the end, the Kingdom of France was not able to secure any harbors, and the attack resulted in a complete failure. By the end of 1946, Britain still stood strong as ever. The beginning of 1947 brought good news to the American people. The heavy blows dealt to the syndicalists made Mexico realize that its ideology was faltering throughout the world. Though it was not part of the International faction, its government knew that many suspected talks were made behind people's back for a possible coalition. As a showcase of good faith, and in the hopes not to provoke America to declare war on Mexico to get its former Pacific states back, they were returned by Mexico without bloodshed. Though Central Europe was focused on the British Isles, the Eastern European countries were worried about the Japanese that kept conquering land throughout Russia. In India, French and American reinforcements had arrived, and though the opposing factions were able to delve a bit deeper into the Dominion's lands, they were soon halted and reversed. Then in June of 1947, the Americans had a go on invading Britain. They chose the outer point in the southwest to avoid being flanked from other sides. But the front they faced was narrow, and the enemy had heavy artillery and guns set up along the road. The British coastal cliff battles took a heavy toll on the Americans. Their attack was halted in merely 3 weeks. France then tried again and was defeated once more. It started to resemble a repeating scenario like the assaults on the Spanish soil, only this time the Entente forces managed to barely gain any ground during the attacks. It had almost been 2 years since the Commune of France had fallen, and Britain still remained whole. That's when people started to realize that this could go on for a long time. But then all eyes shifted towards the Russian front with the Japanese, as on the 11th of September of 1947, the first nuclear bomb was dropped in Kemerovo. Who ordered the dropping of the bomb was unclear. Some blamed the Japanese, others the Koreans. In any case, this disaster resulted in Russia focusing even more on the war against the Japanese, but also boosted a significant number of men who volunteered to join the forces as they found the atomic bombing a personal offense. The conquered land by Japan so far was puppeted to Siberia, with the government pledging loyalty to the co-prosperity sphere with Japan as its leader. The Russians had much more manpower than their opposition, revealing partly why up until now they had not paid too much attention to this particular conflict. But with the atomic attack, everything changed, and the co-prosperity sphere would taste the bitter revenge by the Russian people. Then on November 15th, news was released on Bulgaria. The death of the late Tsar Ferdinand I had caused the Bulgarian people to come together and mourn the man that had brought them and the nation to its golden age and had successfully maintained that golden age. The Tsar's death had saw the ascension of his son, now crowned Tsar Boris III, which was a momentous occasion for Bulgarians around the world. Beloved by many, the new Tsar had promised to bring change within and without, starting with a new regime change. The Dominion of India and the Bharatiya Commune were still interwoven in a bloody war, but the Indian Empire to the south was crippled and on its last legs. In Britain, things went as usual, with another invasion doomed to fail. This time though, the Austrians managed to pull off a successful invasion at the same time at the Welsh side. Russia kept its promise to now focus more on the battle with Japan, and sent out millions of troops to the front who were eager to avenge those fallen during the bombing, but also years of war and had been ignored. Halfway through 1948, the Dominion of India took control of the Indian Empire and were now able to attack the syndicalists to the east from 2 sides. The major addition of American troops and 2-angle opportunity made it clear that the Dominion would be the victor in this conflict. The amount of units gearing up and assembling in France for whenever a naval invasion was successful in Britain was staggering. The moment a port would be taken, Britain would surely be lost. By September, the Commune in India realized too that it could no longer win. Not even a week later, they capitulated. Since the end of the Weltkrieg, the Indian subcontinent had been split into 3 sides: the loyalist remnants of the British Raj, the socialists of the Indian National Congress, and the reactionary Indian princes who rejected both sides. With the dust having finally settled, the loyalists had proven triumphant, and the Dominion of India now ruled unopposed over the region, setting itself up to become a preeminent world power once it recovered from the devastation of civil war. Now this meant that the American reinforcements, as well as the main army of the Dominion of India, could now focus on Central Europe to hopefully get a foothold on British soil. The Russians were successful in their push against the co-prosperity sphere. The enemy was halted and was now being forced east. Because of the massive span of land that they needed to be routed through, experts believed that this war would still continue for the next 10 years or so. Day in, day out, for months at a time, bombing campaigns were launched to weaken the fortified coastal lines. Yet time and time again, invasion attempts were halted, and soldiers died, achieving nothing in the end. It was almost 3 years since the Commune of France had fallen, and the Union of Britain still held.